and then I have to explain in painstaking detail everything that sort of happened, even to the point where I had to demonstrate. They gave me dolls, and I had to demonstrate to the jury of what happened. Why I entered this space is to be another advocate, another voice for others, right? The voiceless, to help empower others to know that there's someone else that's out there that looks like you, that speaks like you, that has experienced similar emotions as you, who can go out there and advocate for themselves and change the trajectory.
I'm standing in a circle of doubt, trying to get out. I fall upon my face in disgrace, and I'm running down a hall of pain. At least I'm out of the rain. Pouring rain falls on me again and again. Oh, can I afford to cry? I paid the price for every lie, an eye for an eye. Oh,
Hello, I'm Craig.
And I'm Lorward. Welcome to our live program discussion focused on male survivors of childhood sexual abuse, sponsored by the men of Voices Beyond Assault.
As most of us here today, Lorward and I are also survivors. Voices Beyond Assault recently started a men's division because we understand that men's voices are not always heard, and we want to amplify those voices, empower them to heal, and provide resources that are needed.
We're so glad all of you could join us today for this important discussion.
At that, let me introduce our guest today, Lieutenant Dairius Kawewehi. Dairius is a survivor of sexual and domestic abuse by his parents. At the age of 4, one of his teachers discovered he was being abused.
At that point, Dairius was removed from his home and sent to the first of 5 foster homes.
During this time, Dairius was forced to take the stand in a trial to convict his father of sexually abusing him. Between the age of 4 and 6, Dairius was part of this judicial process that resulted in his father being sent to prison until Dairius turned 21 years old.
The trauma Dairius experienced from that trial was compounded as him being moved from foster home to foster home, resulting in Dairius to question his very existence.
But Dairius ultimately persevered, mostly through his own determination, and he now joins us as a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy, having graduated from Purdue University.
It is a story of triumph, and we will focus on today, and we are very honored to have you join us today. Thank you, Dairius.
Yeah, thank you,
so much for
Dairius.
having
Welcome.
me.
Welcome to the program. We want to focus on your healing journey during this program, but it's important that in order to look at the future, we look at the past. So Dairius, tell me, what is the earliest age you remember being either sexually or phically abused?
The earliest age I can remember, at least being physically abused, was age between 2 and 3. So I just definitely remember my birth father. He'd come home from work, and I don't know, he'd be in a mood for some reason, and then I would just get physically beaten with his hands or belt or whatever objects he had around him. Never really understood what was going on. It was sort of just kind of the routine that I had to go through.
This is amazing. I don't think I've ever talked to a survivor that remembers the abuse at such a young age. I mean, do you remember, what did you think was going on? I mean, you had to not even understand anything about what was happening to you when your father was abusing you.
Yeah, I was definitely confused. I mean, I think inherently, as humans, we are very emotional creatures, and just something didn't feel right. And so I constantly had these thoughts at that young age of, why are these things happening? And more so the physical abuse, like why am I being subjected to so much pain? So a lot of times I kind of blame myself, like, did I do something wrong? Did I upset my parents? Why can't I reach out to anyone for help? But it wasn't until there was a car that pulled up in front of the daycare that we didn't recognize. I didn't recognize, and then I just remember that a lady walked out of the car. She was wearing like a like very formal attire, like the things you would see on like TV. And then it was moments later where my things were packed up and I was motioned to go into this car, and that was it. And at the time period, I felt scared because like my brother was left behind there, and I never had any idea what was happening.
And you were 4 years old. I mean, I can't even imagine how confusing that must have been. And
it's still pretty vivid for me. I mean, 4 years old, but just because of the gravity of the moments that were happening during that time period, I mean, it's just stuck with me 20 plus years later.
So this is discovered, you're taken away by services, and now I'm assuming there's a period where we start to shift into this trial process. Could you tell us a little bit about that and what that was like for you? What you're feeling?
Yeah, so that first day was just a swirl of confusion, like a whirlwind of mixed emotions, right? As scary as it was, for some reason, my initial instinct was like, when am I going home, right? Despite the fact of like the abuse and everything else happening, but just being in that confusing, traumatizing moment, I just wanted to go back to what was known for me. So after leaving the daycare, I was taken to what seems like a medical facility or something, and I was just being examined. I felt like a lab rat. Blood tests were being done. They had different tubes in me, asking me a lot of questions, and so I was kind of just going through that process. So that alone was traumatizing for me, because no one was really explaining what was going on. Granted, like, I don't know how you explain that to a child that young. And so, what seems like ages later, I'm told that I'm going to a new home, and I don't know how you explain that to someone. That concept I feel is pretty foreign to everyone.
yeah.
And so I just remember being taken to this random house in this other part of the island that I've never been to, and then told that this is my new family, which again, strange concept. I didn't like. I was very confused, very scared, and at that point, my walls started closing around me because I just didn't know what to do.
So how did did you stay overnight in a hospital and then go to this family, or was this all happen in the same 24-hour period?
It was the same 24-hour period.
So wow, so you went right from this discovery as a 4-year-old, from this discovery to the hospital or doctor and having everybody asking you questions and poking and prodding you, to going to a new home, all within the same day. That's just had to be so difficult. Do you still think about that today? Does it ever haunt you, that feeling, or that vision of what went on, even though you were 4 years old?
To this day, I mean, I'm not really affected by it. I mean, every now and then, especially when I do these kind of things, I'll have those memories flood back, but the emotions don't affect me anymore. Just, I've gone through 14 plus years of therapy and a long healing journey to get to this point where I can outwardly and publicly speak about it to others, to kind of share the raw emotions and how I've overcome that. So but because the memories are so vivid, I can still kind of think back to, even though some images may be fuzzy, but the emotions are kind of still there, where I can still kind of tap into what younger me was kind of going through at that time.
Well, then
but I just
2 years you went through a trial, and so now you're in a new family. You have to get used to that. When did the trial begin, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I entered this new foster home, and it was essentially what felt like within the first couple of weeks, ministered to go to therapy, right? It was kind of part of my records that I was required to go to at least weekly therapy. I think at that point I was probably going two to three times a week. And then on top of that, I would be meeting with the legal team, at least once or twice a week. And I would also be meeting with my social worker. So it was pretty much all hands on deck to get as much details out of me, so they could start building their case. And so, I was going through these sessions where initially also my birth mother was sitting in on some of these sessions. So that like I just felt I felt scared of being judged by my own birth mother, just because I've attempted to let her know what was happening, and I just never really got that reciprocation of like, I hear you, I feel you, and I want to be here to be your safe space. Never got that from her. Right? She's my mother because she physically gave birth to me, but that's like kind of all I see her as. And so going through these sessions, it just felt like really being exposed, right? Like I'm under a spotlight, and they want every single thing out of me. Teaching me how I take to the stand, and getting my rights read to me, and swearing over a Bible. I mean, they taught me through this, for about 2 years. And so in between that time period before the actual large case in front of like a jury, I had some other closed door sessions with just the judge and my legal team to kind of make sure that the judge can at least hear my side of the story before proceeding further.
Yeah, and again, when we talk about this, all of this going on sounds overwhelming for an adult, but you were between the ages of 4 and 6. It's just incredible to even fathom. I can't even fathom that.
And I was still going to school too.
Yeah, just trying to be somewhat normal, right, and get used to a new family. Wow, it's really amazing that you survived that.
It's a lot for anyone. And that's, so much is happening for you. You're placed into this new environment. You're just going through this entire process. And can you take us through a little bit of like what that first foster home experience was? Like, did you feel safe in that environment? What was your like feeling towards being in this new place? What were your feeling towards like your other like new family members?
So this first foster home, I remember showing up on my first day, and I'm told that so there was 3 adults that were in this household, and the younger adult is like the legal guardian or the foster parent, and she lived with she was taking care of both of her parents. They were elderly, probably in their early 70s, something like that, and I think she was like in her probably like early 50s. And so they had already like a set of foster children. So I think at the time it was probably 4 or 5 foster children, and then me. So I would make number 5 or 6, I can't remember. And it's just a strange feeling because like despite how my parents were, that in my head, right, those are my parents, and then I have a brother, and now I'm told that this family is now my family. So it was really strange for me to kind of go in there with everything that had just happened, the morning prior, and everything that kind of transpired immediately afterward, to be in this household. And so I remember, awkwardly trying to introduce myself to some of the other siblings, and there was a pretty large age range between us. So I was the youngest, and then some of the siblings were like in middle school, and I think one of them was just about to enter high school. So there's a pretty big age gap between us. But I think just having that shared experience of pain, eventually I was able to kind of bond with some of my siblings because they understood at least the raw emotions that they felt when they were going through early, because some of them have, at that point in time, been in the system for like 10 or 12 years. And so I felt a lot more safety between like my siblings than with my actual legal guardians. They were quite verbally abusive. If we, let's say I don't know, said a bad word or something, or I don't know, just random things that kids will do, right? Just because we're growing and we're learning how to be good young children. Sometimes our guardian would make us stare at a wall for hours on end, right, without even going to the bathroom. Like timeout is what they called it. Sometimes I would get chili pepper water squirted in my mouth if I said something wrong or if I disobeyed. This is like the early 90s, so this is kind of how life was in Hawaii. So I guess it was pretty normal. So I did get, abused, spanked with whatever she had on her, wooden stick, slippers, hand, like belt. If I was misbehaving. I never really felt I could. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I don't think I ever felt like I could open up to how I was feeling inside, because granted, being our legal guardians, that doesn't mean they always have the complete insight as to what brought the child into foster care. It's very high level for them, from what I understand. It's like, this is years later that I knew this, but they have some sort of inkling of like, this child has physical or something, but they don't really get the details. Really, it's your therapist and your social worker that have a lot more details, at least from my understanding, having gone through it. And so I never really opened up to my the adults there as to like what happened to me and like how I'm trying to process that, and trying to learn how to control my emotions. So I definitely did act out a lot. And I was, like I said, going to therapy, at least 2 times a week. But even then, it was pretty surface level for me. I never really I think I felt safe with myself to share what happened, because I felt like it was going to kind of consume me. So I kind of kept things inside and didn't fully open up with everything that was happening. Because like dealing with being in a new family, dealing with going to these legal proceedings and going to school for the first time, like going to school for the first time as a child, like in a normal house setting, is already like a big thing. But then, I'm in like an unfamiliar house and then also going to school for the first time. So it was just kind of a lot. So I kind of just shut down, at least for my first 2 years.
So how long were you in this first foster home?
This first home was about 4, almost 5 years.
So we're talking about the last day in court.
Yep. So I just remember that morning, just feeling extremely anxious, extremely nervous. My legal team, they're trying to coach me behind the scenes to kind of keep me calm. My social worker and my therapist are just kind of reassuring me that we've been practicing this for a couple years now, and just go up there, just be truthful, just share what happens, right? You shared it with us before, and I get my rights read to me. I swear over a Bible that I'm going to tell the truth, and then I have to explain in painstaking detail everything that sort of happened during the time up until I was 4, of everything that was happening, even to the point where I had to demonstrate. They gave me dolls, and I had to demonstrate to the jury of what happened.
Wow.
So that's kind of why they prepped me for so long, just because that in of itself, like, you're reintroducing trauma. So that was one of the most difficult things I've had to do to date. And then at one point, I don't remember if it was one of the other lawyers or if it was the judge himself, told me to point out my birth father in front of me, and I couldn't do it, just because like I suppressed the image from me. So I just physically, like, he was literally probably 10-15 feet in front of me, and I couldn't do it. So after I came off the stands and everything was done, I wasn't there in the courtroom when the judgment was made, just because the team wanted to get me out of there because I was triggered. But I was told by the legal team afterward that my birth father was going to be put in prison for 15 years or until I turned 21, whichever came first. And after I got back to my foster home, my insides came right out. I couldn't handle all that pent up anxiety and emotions, and so it finally came all out, and I was just relieved that I was done.
Why did you leave your first foster home?
Yeah, so the trial was done. So at this point, I was in first grade. I think in the first like the fall semester of first grade. And so at that point, like I finally had like a sigh of relief. Like, all right, this person that did really bad things to me is going away, right? Like he's going through um, the justice system, right? And so I think at this point I started to feel I could open up more and bonds more with some of my other siblings. I felt like maybe I can be a normal student at school. So I just started to kind of be a kid again, right? Just a little bit. Just started to open up. Kind of let the walls come down just a little bit to connect with others. But of course, like at this point in time, I didn't really know how to regulate my emotions. So I would have outbursts every now and then. I was getting in trouble at school. So I'd be in the principal's office pretty frequently, and I would have altercations with my foster mother. And again, like I would, get put in timeout. I would get, like hit because I'm being disobedient or whatever. So this kind of went on until my first half of third grade, to the point where at one point she um, had told me that she was possibly going to have to move me to a different home because she was telling me that there's a certain quota of foster children that she could have in her household. Like I didn't mention this before, but so when I first came in, there was 5 to 6 siblings. At some points, it kind of surged, and we had 10 to 12 of us living in the home. And sometimes we'd come back down to about 4. So it kind of fluctuated every now and then. But over the course of about the 4 or 5 years I was there, she just mentioned to me that I would potentially have to move to a different home just because of like how things
She
work.
say it, did she say it in a threatening way, or was it just conversational? I mean, did she say it when she was disciplining you, or what?
Uh, Most of the time, it came out when she was disciplining me, like as a sign of a threat, like I can kick you out whenever I want, kind of thing. Um, and so, I mean, that was just pretty routine. So the final day
So,
we had
so you didn't feel very safe, did you? You still didn't feel safe. The trial's over, the abuse is over. When do you get to feel safe, right? Is that what you were? I mean, you did not feel safe in this home
not
because she's threatening to get rid of you at any moment, and you don't know where you're going to go, right?
yeah. So I didn't feel safe with like the adults, which is ironic, but I did feel like I could open up to some of my other siblings, like some of the ones that were in high school when I was young. So I was 8, 9 years old. I could open up to them a lot. They would take me around. They kind of sort of raised me in that household. And what was my last day there, which of course at the time I didn't know was going to be my last day. I got into a really bad altercation with my foster mother. She was threatening to remove me from the house. And then I just remember getting slammed into the fridge, and I got cut by a picture down my cheek. I grabbed my school bag and I walked to school. Um, Went through my normal school day, and then I remember coming back home. All of my stuff was on the porch. My social worker was there with her car, and that was it. And I was getting kicked out. But again, like I was told before, that it's because they reached their quota of foster children. There was another car that pulled up, and there's 2 younger kids that went in there. I later found out, years and years later, when I was in high school, that my foster sisters at the time, one of them got back in touch with me through a mutual friend, and we kind of caught up, and she told me the reason why you were removed or kicked out was because they wanted more money from other foster children. They weren't getting as much from you, quote unquote. So that's the reason I got kicked out.
I don't know how this whole foster system works. So tell us about your second foster home.
After I get removed from the first foster home, I'm told I'm going to be going to a new foster home, a new family that can take care of me. So at this point in time, like I said, in my first foster home, I was going to therapy. So I had like that assigned therapist. When I get to this new foster home, I'm assigned a different therapist. And I also moved to a different side of the island. So I know like Hawaii, very small place, but for me, like going from one side of the island to the other is like, a big journey. Again, a lot of unknowns and a lot of unfamiliar places. so entering this first foster home, I remember I was getting dropped off by my social worker, and I think maybe not on the same day I was getting there, but maybe a few days afterward, my first therapist came to kind of talk with my new foster parents. And so I remember hearing that my foster mother at the time, which again, I'm super new in this home, probably there about a week or so, she had asked them, why don't you consider, becoming his legal guardians? Because I've known my therapist and her family for, since I entered the system. So it's been about 4 or 5 years. And at the time, they're probably in their like early 40s, maybe mid 40s. They didn't have kids of their own. Her husband was an architect. They're pretty well off, right? And they said that they didn't really have intentions to have kids of their own, and that she just wanted to help give back to the community and be a therapist to children like me. And so it was kind of left at that. And my new parents, right, super welcoming. Very
This
great
was
people.
your second foster home. They were super welcoming. Did you stay in therapy? Because she was your therapist. They were your therapist. She was your therapist. Did you stay?
So I wasn't in therapy, not with her anymore. So I had a new therapist that was assigned to me, also that was welcoming, I would say. And he's known my new parents, like new family, for a number of years at this point. And I think when I was entering, there was already 4 siblings, 5. There's 5 siblings already, and then I was number 6. And again, in this household, we did fluctuate sometimes. I think at one point I counted there was 15 of us, and then it would come back down to like 4 or 5 of us.
But in the second foster home with your former therapist, were you the only one? Were you?
That's what I'm going to get to afterward. That's home number 3. It I guess gets a little confusing. So this second home was good. So I count the time periods of when I was in different homes by the grade I was in. So as I mentioned before, so I just finished up first half of 3rd grade. I was coming to the second half of 3rd grade in the second home, and I started. One of my siblings, we had a shared interest in basketball, so we would go to the local park. We'd play basketball all the time. So that was kind of one of my outlets, was basketball. We were also very into Pokemon trading cards, and so I had a collection at that point, and so we would bond over that. So I could bond with at least one of my new siblings. I just remember at first I felt like really embarrassed when I first showed up, just because again, like, new situation, right? Unfamiliar people. For me, there's no safety net in this circumstance at the time because I don't know anyone. And so I shared a room with who's going to be one of my new brothers. And I was crying like in the middle of the night. I was just overwhelmed with so many emotions. But he didn't really say anything the next day. And we sort of just kind of hit it off on trying to get to know each other. So I felt comfort in that. Going to my new school again, like every new kid, you're just going to be kind of overwhelmed with, like who could potentially be your friends, right? Like how is this the teacher is going to be like, just generally like, are you going to be accepted, right? And so that's kind of what I was going through in this circumstance. But over time, like about 1 year between 3rd and 4th grade, I started to make some friends. I, was bonding pretty well with my siblings. And all while this is happening, it turns out my first therapist went behind everyone's back, went through the training to become legal guardians, and then told my therapist and told my social worker and then my foster mother at the time that they're going to take me away. And they had already had the paperwork signed, everything was approved. But of course, no one had a say, especially me. And I'm 10 years old at this point. And so that was traumatizing for me.
So that's you were pulled out of the second home now?
I was just pulled out of the second home because they're like, hey, we are going to be his parents now. And so that was just like a confusing situation for everyone involved, right? Like everyone was blindsided by the situation. My foster mom tried to reassure me and try to make the situation a little lighthearted and say that, they come from such a great educational and financial background that, they could probably provide a lot more for you than she could, because my foster mother in that home, didn't come from the greatest financial background, but she did have a great heart. So she just tried to reassure me that things are going to be okay. And I didn't really have a say in the whole situation. And so I just had to go with it. My stipulation was that if I'm going to get removed again in the middle of the school year, so now this is time number 3 that this is happening to me, then I want to finish school at this current school for 4th grade. And then for 5th grade, they can send me wherever the heck they want. And so that was the agreement we made. And I was moving again to the other side of the island. And so while I was finishing up 4th grade at my new parents' house, I would wake up at like 4 in the morning so I can get to school by, 7 o'clock.
So now you're in the 3rd foster home. You're going across the way to school, and how did that work out? This was your therapist also? This was your first therapist?
So this was my first therapist, and then I was told that I was not going back to see my second therapist anymore. So they removed me from therapy. The thought process.
So you were removed from therapy completely at 10 years old.
Yep.
Only 4 years after the trial ended.
Yep.
And 6 years after the abuse that you were experiencing, you were taken out of therapy, and you're in your 3rd foster home. So, and how long did that last?
So, while I was finishing up the 4th grade year in my 3rd foster home, so what was kind of triggering right off the start, like, big red flags that, of course, I didn't know at the time. I was told that I was not allowed to talk to my other siblings, right, from my second foster home, which is difficult to do when I'm going to the same elementary school.
Same school, yeah.
And a few of us were only like a year or 2 apart. Like we're pretty much like in line as far as like age levels, and I was the second to the youngest. So there was a bulk of us that were all in the same elementary school, and then like my other 2 siblings were in middle school. And we would always meet our parents, from my second home, their current home, at this big tree right outside of the school grounds, like at the end of school. And so I was also getting picked up there now that I'm in my new home, but I have to stand away from them and not talk to them because they didn't want me to get brainwashed, quote unquote. And then I wasn't allowed to go talk to the same friends that I had. I was like, this just doesn't make sense. Like, I don't understand what's happening here. I was told that I wasn't allowed to, play basketball anymore because it's a dirty sport. And so, slowly, this new family is trying to mold me to who they perceive what I should be, right? And because there was a lot of ways that I was trying to have my outlets in terms of how do I process my emotions, and basketball being one of those. Some of the friends I made, being another way that I could kind of open up beyond myself, and all of these pillars that are being taken away from my life. So I started to kind of shut down. I didn't have an outlet at therapy anymore. The thought process was that she's a therapist, so she can do it and be a parent at the same time. She's never been a parent before. Those are 2 different roles. Like, you being a therapist does not mean you're a good parent. You being a good parent does not mean you're a therapist, right? Very separate roles. And I'm 10 years old, right, with these kind of thoughts in my head. And
so how long were you in that foster home?
So I was in this home for about a year. And so after I finished 4th grade, they told me, because I'm half Black, half Japanese, right? They told me that they would send me to a Japanese private school so they can kind of acclimate me to my culture, which, I thought, this is great. I've never really been exposed explicitly to my Japanese culture. Hawaii does have a very extensive Japanese heritage there. So I'm around it, all the time, but to explicitly be like in a classroom to learn Japanese, learn about the culture, the arts, the literature, like I thought that would be a great experience. So that I was super grateful for, that they kind of thought of that. But again, this was kind of forced upon me. It's not like I really had a choice. I was just told that, hey, this is what's going to happen. So I took the pre-test and got accepted, and then was told, there's a specific set of curriculum that you have to go through. So you're required to do an art class, you're required to take a sport, you're required to play an instrument. And so I was dictated by my foster mother, like, hey, you're going to play the flute, because she used to play the flute. You're going to take these specific sort of sports. So one of them was tennis. Never played tennis in my life. And so like life started to become like very regimented for me. I had to wake up at this specific time, right? They would set an alarm. I had to go to bed by a specific time, they would just come in, turn the lights off. So like life became very regimented. Life became like, this is the box that you're living in. These are the guide rails that you have to live your life by, essentially. And so I started to rebel a lot. I wasn't just used to all of these things being forced upon me. I couldn't really feel like I could be myself. So there was a lot of contention there. This went on for the first 6 or 7 months like this, like constant contention, to the point where it started to seem that they really couldn't handle it anymore. And like, obviously I couldn't handle my own emotions either. And it was, towards the end of that first semester of 5th grade, where they sort of told me, after the 5th grade class, they would take an annual trip from Hawaii to the East Coast to kind of, for American history. Like that's the history topic for 5th graders in Hawaii. And so they said, after this trip, we're going to have a trial period of you out of the house for a week at a different home. We're going to think things through. And then, we'll kind of reconvene from there. Which again, foreign concept. I didn't think parents can take a break like that. I don't think that's how real life works. And they explicitly came into this scenario to legally adopt me, right? So like you made a conscious decision to take a child into your home and take care of them. So I don't think there's any givesies, backsies. But that point aside, I was told that I'll be in this home temporarily for a week, and then you'll come back and we'll go from there. A week goes by, and this is now my 4th home, and all my things show up on the porch with my social worker, and there's no face-to-face, there's no phone call from my parents that said they were going to adopt me, and that was that. I was just sort of dumped into this new environment, this new home.
Your fourth foster home, and you are now are you 10 years old?
I'm still 10. Point? Yeah, so I just finished that first half of 5th grade. This is like the winter break time period that this is all happening. So right around the holidays. And now I'm in this new home with a woman that is a single parent, single foster parent. And I'm the oldest sibling now in this home. So to kind of give everyone context of like everything I've been going to up to this point. My first foster home, I was one of many children, right? I was somewhere in the middle, towards like the younger side. In my second foster home, again, one of many, and towards the younger side. My third foster home was an only child. And then now this 4th foster home, I'm the oldest of 4 total. The second oldest being 4 years old, 2-year-old, and then like a baby, so now coming in at 10 years old, I'm supposed to be like the responsible like child, right? And up to this point, like all my sessions in therapy, I didn't really fully come to terms with all the emotions that I was feeling. So I was still kind of going through my own healing journey.
Were you put back in therapy when you went to this 4th home?
Yep. So I was back into therapy with my therapist that I had in my second home. So okay. Told my social worker, I don't know, she. But
this 4th home was probably the worst one, right? In a lot of ways.
In a lot of different ways, I would say, yeah.
Yeah. You attempted suicide 3 times while there, right? Yep. You had told me this. What led you to those attempts and how old were you then when you were there at your 4th home for how long?
Just about 6 months. I was turning 11. So 10 to 11 is like the time period I was there. And so it wasn't like just this home specifically that led me to like, attempting to take my life, but it was like the culmination of everything that's happening at this point, right? Like now I'm moving to my 4th home. I'm going to my 4th elementary school. This new strange foreign environment. I haven't really processed everything that's happening, right? Especially I didn't really process like what transpired all before I turned 4 years old. I still haven't dealt with those emotions, even though I went to court for it. That didn't mean I healed from it, or the fact that I accepted it, right? Like I stated the facts to the judge and the jury, but that was that. Like internally, I didn't process that. So I'm kind of dealing with all of that, and I'm bringing this to this home. And so what kind of was the tipping point for me? So one, I was going to now a new elementary school, and in this one particularly, I was getting bullied. Right, I was just being made fun of, like, fifth graders, right? Like the kids will be kids, right? Is what people say. But I guess children don't really realize like the effect of what they're saying and how that can affect others around them. So I was being picked on and bullied at school because I was like the new kid. I wore glasses at the time. I started wearing glasses at third grade. And so now like I'm just one of those kids. Like Harry Potter was like very popular back then. So like I just got made fun of a lot. I'm dealing with that at school, and I don't really have anyone else to open up to about it, like in my household, because everyone else is super young, and then I couldn't really talk to my foster mother. Secondly, there was a lot of responsibility placed on me because I am the oldest child in that home, right? So it's inherent, apparently, that I am the one to take care of all these other children, right? Like feed them, put them to bed, change their clothes, shower them, like all these things. To put into context, my foster mother in that home, she would work extremely late nights. And so after she'd go to work after I was in school, and the other children would be put into like, I think a family friend's house or something. So they would take care of them. And then when I came home from school, then they would bring them back. So I was still with these young children until, from like maybe 4 in the evening until like 10 o'clock at night or something, until like our foster parent came home. And so I had that responsibility going on me. And then to kind of tip everything off, like my foster mother and I, we had contentions all the time because, again, I was still dealing with a lot of emotion, a lot of trauma. And so I would act out. Maybe I forgot to wash the dishes, or I forgot to like fold the laundry, or something random, something very commonplace that a child may forget, but I would get blown up about it. And so we would be arguing all the time. And so just like these pent up emotions led me a few times to take my life. So what had stopped me from
the third time she discovered you, right?
Yep.
And how did she react to that? I mean, she saved your life, or were you in the process, or what happened?
So the third time the attempt failed. The rope snapped, and I was just found unconscious on the floor in my bedroom in the closet. And she was kind of hysterical at that point. She was freaking out. She, I guess, could see all of the culmination of the emotions I was feeling kind of encapsulated in that moment. And I think she finally came to her senses and realized like the amount of pressure she was putting on me. And so, we talked about it. I talked about how I was feeling, and like all the pressure she was putting on me, and the fact that like, because she didn't know what happened in my childhood, so she had no idea what I was kind of going through. She just thought I was just some young 10-year-old that was like in the foster care system, but didn't necessarily understand like what led to that. And so I think she started to kind of come to terms with that, and we talked about it then. And then from that day forward, my thought process was that, I thought of my brother, right? So I mentioned much earlier, and my thought process, being 10 years old, was the fact that I, up until this point, was able to live a somewhat normal life, in the sense that I can feed myself, I can breathe normally, I can walk, I can talk, I can express myself, I can go outside and feel the sunlight and play basketball or whatever. And so those thoughts kind of flooded into my head, and I'm thinking of my brother, who from birth was placed into a situation that he couldn't control, right? And just immobile from birth. And so thinking of that really broke my heart. The fact that I was about to just throw my life away. Like this chance that I have at life is precious, and for all I know, like we only get one life to live. And so from that day forward, I dedicated the rest of my life to my brother, so I could live it, so that for him to experience. And at that point in time, I didn't hear from him, right? Like no one in the system, like my therapist, social worker, no one told me about how he's doing, or even if he's still alive. Because like from what I was told, that his rare brain disease was would have only allowed him to live until he was 3. He was still alive, and I was in my birth home with him. I was 4, he was 5. But now that I'm 10, going on 11, I had no idea where he was or how he was doing. And so that led me to never want to take my life again. No matter how bad life got, it's not worth taking your life. And not for like the sake of others, but for the sake of yourself. Like you're not allowing yourself a chance to overcome and heal and change the trajectory of your life. And so that was like the thoughts that I took deeply within myself. And
Did you
from
did
that
you
day
ever get to
forward,
see your brother again?
yeah. So I also brought that up to my foster mother in that home, and so I think it was like literally like the following week that she got in touch with my social worker, and we went to go visit my brother, and he was alive and well, in a care home. Also separated from our parents, and just seeing him there, like still thriving in life, right? Like he was told by the doctors that he would only live until he was 3, and here he is at 11, going on 12. Still just living life as best as he can, right? Um,
He
and
was aware of things. Was he aware? Was he mentally aware?
Yeah, he was mentally aware. So they would do scans on him, so like he could respond to, like, if you're saying things to him, and they'll measure the activity, and they can see that he is responding to you, and like he recognized like who I am, and so just to kind of be there and experience that and see him again for the first time, just meant the world to me. And at the time,
So
I
you
didn't
got
know
to
that.
talk to him. Did you talk to him and tell him what was going on and how much he meant to you as far as being an inspiration to want to live?
Yeah, so I told him, I didn't really tell him everything that was happening, but I just told him like, I want to live life as best I can for you, and that I love my brother, and I just wish that he could live life like normally as well. And I didn't know at the time, but he did pass away when I was 14, 15. So that was the last time I saw him, when I was 10.
It was an inspirational moment for you.
Yep.
And
That time period really transpired to what actually started my healing journey, or at least yeah, started that process. I took it upon myself to actually open up in therapy, and so I told my therapist, like, this is what was happening. So at this point in time, I didn't really explicitly say out loud that I was depressed, that I had thoughts of suicide, thoughts of harming myself, and I didn't have physical signs. Like I didn't cut or anything. I just did the actual attempts, and I never told him up until this point. And so now I started to tell him what was going on. The fact that I was being bullied, like I had contention in the home. And so little did I know, like while I was opening up about that, I was just wrapping up 5th grade. He had already worked in the background a way to get me out of this home, to get me to somewhere that I could thrive and have a chance at life, right? Put me in the proper environment to flourish, because he saw the potential in me. I did have a great aptitude for school. So for me, like my studies kind of became my escape. I was reading grade levels above like the normal grade. Like in 1st grade, I was reading like 5th or 6th grade books. And by the time I hit 5th or 6th grade or 5th grade, I was reading like high school level books, because that was my escape. I worked really hard at doing my studies, just because I was constantly told that if you study hard and you work hard, you'll have a chance to, achieve X, right? And so that was like my way of dealing with my emotions, was just through academics and through sports. And so while I told my therapist what was happening, he worked with my social worker and a legal team to get me placed into a different home. So I could, he was kind of mounting the evidence of like, this is how he used to perform in school, and now this is what's happening. And we have to change his environment for him to thrive. So he had to kind of argue in court to kind of get that situation changed. And so it was like a few months later, I had just finished 5th grade. So it's like the summertime. And then I'm told by my therapist at one of the sessions, like, hey, you're getting moved back to the second home you lived in. So second home became my 5th home. And I was very ecstatic of the fact that I would be able to be back in an environment where that was like the one home where like legitimately the parents were super welcoming, very understanding. My mom now, who was my 5th home, has gone through a whole lot herself, right? She kind of had a very extensive journey in her own life, and so she really could reciprocate with us. And that was like the one I guess adult in my life that really understood.
Did she
Did
she experience abuse or what?
I don't want to speak too much for her own story, but she has experienced a lot of very traumatic and tragic things in her life as a child up until even through her adult years. She has 10 of her own children, 6 birth, 4 step. And then at this point in time, she had 5 adopted. And then I was going to be number 6.
Wow.
And she even had to like get a court plea and everything, because there is a limit to the amount of special needs kids that you could have adopted. And she like got that waived. And they were like, well, we'll let you adopt him, but you'll get no state support money. She's like, I don't care about that. I just want to bring him home and help him in his life.
She sounds like an amazing woman, and so she adopted you.
She did.
And now, did you finally feel loved and finally feel safe?
It was the first moment where I never had the thought of, when am I moving again? Which a kid should not have that thought, right? Like, it's just a crazy idea for someone to have that thought process at such a young age. So it was the first time ever I felt like I could take a breath. All right, I'm not going anywhere. I have a family. I have people that are here to encourage me and help me with whatever I wanted to accomplish in life, big or small, doesn't matter. And she didn't care about like what we were going to go and achieve in life. She just cared that we were going to grow up and become good people, good citizens, like, treat others the way you want to be treated. And that's really all she cared about. The fact that like we had a chance and opportunity to make our own decisions in life and take life where we wanted to. And so it was like the first time I could actually experience stability in my life. The first time I could experience having a family of my own, of opening up to others. And that's really what set the trajectory for the rest of my life, was just like that act of someone looking at me and saying like, I want to give you a chance at life.
So this was a turning point for you, and you went on. Did you go back into therapy at this point, and how did things go from there? Because this was when you turned your life around, right?
Yep. So I like I mentioned, so I finished 5th grade and I got moved into like my now final home. The actual adoption didn't happen until I was 7th grade, because there's some process time that occurs. So 6th grade, I'm going to yet again another elementary school. So this is school number 5 at this point. And so during that time period, I'm continuing sessions with that same therapist. At this point, I've known him for a significant chunk of my life, which, for me being that young, it's a majority of my life. Um, and so I started opening up to them, like everything started coming out. Uh, you know, to the early stages of my past, to everything that kind of happened between. And he's just helping me rewire my brain, because at this point I had that victim mentality, the fact that, like, that mentality that I would never overcome what was happening to me inside. And so he kind of helped open up the light to show that this was not your fault, right? Like, as unfortunate as it is, sometimes bad things happen to good people, right? There's no explanation around it, but things like this happens. And so it was more important for me to not try to think of ways of how we could change the past, because you can't, right? The past happens. Like right now, like things I'm saying right now, like a minute from now is the past, right? You can't change that. But you can change how you feel about it, how you think about it, and how you react to it, and move forward beyond it. And that was like the biggest life lesson I've ever learned in my entire life, because that allowed me to remove this weight and guilt that I felt for some reason. Like I felt guilty that I was abused, right? I shouldn't feel guilty about that. That's not my issue. It happened to me, but how do I move past that? I felt guilty for, like, the whole situation that put my birth father in prison, which, again, like, I don't know why I felt that way, but I just felt that way. And so he kind of had to help me unpack all of these emotions and all this entanglement, and help me kind of think and feel differently, and just realize that, like, this is my life to live, and that, like, I can build the future that I envision. And so, it was very, he was down in the trenches with me, to kind of help build my uh, path and vision for how I wanted my life to transpire. Like, my foster mother, who became my adopted mother, also down in the trenches with each and every one of us, to help find ways that she could better support us. She also would go to therapy sessions on her own just to see how she could be a better parent,
Wow.
which I was really grateful for, because she even admitted, I mean, she raised her first set of 10 children, who are much, much older than us. To put into context, my oldest siblings are between the ages of 50 and 66. So
Wow.
they are much older than the rest of us. And of course, in those early days, and, like, the mid 50s and 60s, she, parenting styles back then were very different. And so she admitted she had to learn how to kind of rewire her style of parenting so she could better take care of children like us, especially with, a lot of our different pasts, and own versions of trauma and
Is your mother
emotions.
still around? Is she still around today?
My mother's still around. She's 83 this year, just turned 83
Wow.
about 2 weeks ago.
She sounds like I feel like I should. Is she Catholic? I should write a letter to the Pope about her. She sounds like a saint. I mean, what she's done for all these kids is quite incredible, and it just shows you the importance, and your therapist too, the importance of finding those right people in your life, especially as children,
Mhm.
that really can impact you. What are your thoughts about the foster system today? I mean, because it really kind of failed you for a long, long time, and you were just lucky enough to get the right people. Or do you not feel like it failed you? Do you think it's a good system? I mean, I don't know. It's hard to believe that, but what are your thoughts on it?
So this is going to be a very difficult question to process. This is also one of the reasons I stepped into this space pretty late into the year last year. I've been in the Navy now for about 7 years, going on 8. And up into this point, like, I've gone through my healing, right? And so I wanted to come into this space to be able to share, the experiences that I've had, and how I've been able to overcome, that sort of past. So I come in more so as an advocate for other I guess the terminology is foster alumni is what they call us. I'm still trying to get used to all the terminology here. And that could be those that either aged out of the system, or those like me that were adopted to a family. And having met one of my earliest foster sisters when I was in high school, I thought I had a different idea of how that foster home went, and she had a very different experience. And I later found out that her and her sister, their birth related, were being abused sexually by the father of the legal guardian in that house. And so that just altered my reality for what my experiences were in that foster home. Like, that was not happening to me, but it was happening to a lot of my other siblings that were there. But then to come into this house where I got adopted from, I mean, you're looking at a parent who already raised her own set of children and started foster care when she was in her mid 50s. And at a certain point in time, had 40 or 50 children come through her house that she had some sort of impact on their life, to the point that we would be at a grocery store and some random person would come up to my mom and hug her and be like, "Hey, Auntie, it's great to see you again." And I'd ask her, like, "Hey, who was that?" And she was like, "Oh, like, he came to my household like for a few months, like 15 years ago." I'm like, "What?" Like, wow. Like, the impact, to see the impact that she's had on our community is very inspiring. So that alone gives me hope. But the sad reality is that's not the case. That is not the norm. The norm, unfortunately, is a lot of people who enter into this space. There's a population of those that are motivated by the money and the support you get from the state. And very unfortunately, it impacts a lot of the lower income population, because there's that motivation of the monetary aspects when it comes to being a foster parent or legal guardian. And that's just the unfortunate truth, like, to just be very completely blunt about it. There's the other circumstance where people have some sort of like saviorism about being a foster parent. I'm doing this because this is good for the world and I get to save these kids. Like, no. You're not saving kids, right? That's not what this space is about, right? And so unfortunately, there's not enough people that are there just genuinely wanting to provide love, care, and support. Like, that's literally that's what it needs to be. It's definitely not an easy experience being a foster parent, having seen how my mom has handled it. It's definitely not an easy space to be in. And I think that just needs to be respected, right? And I think there just needs to be a better screening process of people coming into this space, a better educational process about all that's happening, because it's not all just they come in, get the training, adopt a kid, and that's it. That's where the healing happens. Like, healing does not happen at adoption. It did not happen for me at the court when the physical papers were signed. That's not the end all be all. And so I think that sort of discourse and dialogue is not talked about enough. And so that's like my raw thoughts on the foster care system. Now I can only speak to my own experiences and really for the state of Hawaii, where I'm from. So I don't know how it is in like across the nation, and that's why I entered this space, is to be another advocate, another voice for others, right? The voiceless, to help empower others to know that there's someone else that's out there that looks like you, that speaks like you, that has experienced similar emotions as you, who can go out there and advocate for themselves and change the trajectory of their life. And so that's what brought me into this space.
So you went from high school, where you were really completing your healing. You went into the ROTC, and then you went to college as part of the ROTC to Purdue University, achieved great things. You decided then to, well, you kind of had to, right, I guess, because you stayed in the military as part of that program, but now your obligation is completed long ago, like what, 4 years ago? And
about 3 years ago.
3 years ago, yeah. So you're still in the military. Now, I just want to touch during this time, your father, you turned 21, your birth father got out of prison, but you don't have any contact with your mother and father. And we had talked about this. Your birth mother, you found out, took the father back into her life, and after he was out of prison. That's correct, right?
Yeah, so I can back up and provide some context for
Sure.
the folks
Okay.
here. So in middle school, when I got adopted, I was 7th grade. I was told by my social worker that my grandparents had been looking for me. My grandparents on my birth mother's side, so I'm half Japanese, so my Japanese side of the family had been looking for me for years, right? We're talking over a decade. And
This is your birth mother's family?
Birth mother's family, and they live
your
on
birth
the island.
father's family.
Birth father's family, nothing to do with them since
you.
before the court case. So I just never heard from them ever since. So my birth mother's parents live on the island of Kauai, right? Another island in the chain of Hawaii. And, you know, they wanted to at least talk to me on the phone or something, just to kind of hear that I'm okay. So my social worker asked my mom, right? And she asked me like, hey, do you want to meet your grandparents, right? Your social worker found them and you have an opportunity to reconnect with them. And I was very curious because I had very good memories of them in my head. I remember visiting them, like flying to a different island to meet them. And so I said, yes, let me meet them. And so I talked with my grandfather on the phone. We caught up a little bit. And at that point in time, my mom bought me tickets like the next weekend. This is like the summertime to fly up to see them. When I flew up to see them, I did not know at the time that I have a birth sister 1 year younger than me. So literally
same mother and father, same
mother and father. So at one point in time, to kind of give context, so like I said, my birth father went to prison when I was 6. If you do the math, I was 7 or 8 by the time she was born. So however how that worked out, there was some time period where I guess it was out in parole and whatever. So my sister was born. But this was beyond, like, no one told me about this while I was in the system. So this kind of uncovered naturally when I met my birth grandparents. And so I'm at the airport meeting my grandparents, and then you know, they tell me that I have a birth sister. I was just like, wait, what? Who is she? Where is she? Like, you know, I'm just asking all these questions. And the following month or so, my birth sister was flying up to meet my grandparents. So I flew back out so I could meet her. We were living on the same island as well, but I had no contact with my birth mother. And so I got to meet my sister in Kauai. And then fast forward 2 years, right? So I'm entering high school. My birth mother is moving to North Carolina, so she's taking my sister with her. And so I only got to meet her like maybe 3 or 4 times during the summers up on the other island with our grandparents. And then, you know, my sister moved with her mom to North Carolina. During high school was a time period where, again, I still had no contact with my birth father, no contact with my birth mother. And then I sort of tried to keep in touch with my birth sister, just like physical letters. And it was like also the time period where I was still going to therapy, but at this point in time, it was optional. I kind of liked it because I had like some third party person that I could talk to about anything. Because he told me, like, when I started high school, he was like, hey, you don't really need to go to these anymore. You've kind of gone through the wickets, right? Like you're displaying positive trajectory and like your mentality, your outlook on life. But I told him I just like having another friend to talk to. Like, I got really close with him. I've known him at this point in time over a decade. And I still, deep down inside, didn't get to the point where I could have like forgiveness in my heart, right? I was still kind of wrestling with that. And so I knew I still wanted to work on that in high school. So I remember turning 16 and I told my therapist, I was like, hey, I want to say, like, I want to speak out like forgiveness to my birth parents for all that happened, not to their face, but like just between closed doors, between me and my therapist, and like a photo of like the one photo I had of my birth parents. And so he kind of made it a very powerful moment for me, right? If you guys ever read the book The Power of Moments, if you haven't, I highly recommend you read that. But he sort of made it a very special moment for me, kind of like a little ceremony to get me to the point where I was able to kind of speak out the words that I forgive my parents. And that was like the last little turning point for the rest of like everything else that I was able to do in life, was because I got to that point and I had true forgiveness. Like, I have no hatred in my heart for all that happened. Like, I fully accepted that what happened. And I don't resent my parents. It is what it is, and I was able to turn my life around to beyond the expectations of many people. There are so many people that had a lot of doubt in what I could achieve in life and what I could do. I've heard it all. Like, I heard that someday I'm just gonna become a gang member or end up in prison or do drugs or whatever. I've heard it all. And he helped me get to the point where I could kind of ignore all that noise and just kind of choose my own destination in life. And so, having gone through that experience of like, I got to true forgiveness, I wanted to also become a therapist so I can impact other people's lives like he has. That was kind of the direction I wanted for. He already alluded to the fact that I ended up in the military, but I just wanted to give context on how I got to that decision. And so I told my therapist, like, I want to, go to college and study psychology so I can become a therapist like you. But with the expenses of college, I want to join the military first, because I was always inspired by those I've met in the military that, just that self-sacrifice for your country and for other people, right? Even people you don't even know. And so I thought of it as a way for me to kind of learn discipline, to challenge myself beyond myself for others. Where on the other side of that, I would have the opportunity to go to college afterward, right? So I was going to enlist. And so initially I had paperwork to go and enlist in the Marine Corps. I brought that idea up to my therapist and to my career college counselor. I'm in my junior year of high school, so about 16, 17 years old. And my career college counselor was like, absolutely not, right? Because again, like I told you, I poured myself to education, right? So in high school, I started taking honors classes for my freshman year, and then I started taking AP and IB courses from my sophomore year up until my senior year. And I was taking more classes than was allowed for one to take, but I just wanted to kind of keep myself busy and focused on setting myself up, right, for what I could do in life. And so my therapist and my social worker came up with a plan to have me apply for the R2C scholarship, which I didn't even know existed, where I could, one, still serve my country in the military, and then two, still get the education that I wanted to do without having to pay out of pocket, right? That was my big stipulation. I wasn't going to go to college and have to pay it. I was either going to find a way to get it paid for, like via scholarships or something, or just go to college later, right? That was kind of my thought process. And so they found a way of kind of mirroring this together, right? They didn't tell me like, oh no, that's too hard, right? Like that's impossible. They found ways to encourage and push me along my journey. So I was grateful for that. So that allowed me to apply for the Navy R2C scholarship. I got accepted in my junior year, right before the summer before my senior year. And then I applied to about 15 or 16 schools. And I ultimately chose Purdue for the R2C program. It's very well known. And then as part of getting the scholarship, it was recommended that I study something in the STEM field, right? So science, technology, engineering, math. Psychology does not fall into that, right? It's liberal arts. And so I asked my physics teacher if I were to study something in like the engineering field, what would be quote unquote the easier of the two? Because I struggled in physics and calculus in high school. I got tutored. I'd be at school till about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, trying to keep up and get tutored from my fellow students and from my teachers, so I can keep moving moving ahead. And he recommended I study mechanical engineering, which I was like, okay, that sounds challenging, but sounds doable. So I ended up applying to Purdue's School of Engineering to study mechanical engineering. And then while I was at college, as Craig was alluding to, I turned 21, right, in my junior year of college. And during that year, I actually studied abroad in Ireland as a way of, I've always wanted to go to a different country. I walked into college with the motivation and desire to at least study abroad somewhere in the world. Ideally Japan, because I'm half Japanese. I've learned the language. But studying engineering in Japanese is very difficult. So I ended up choosing a program to study abroad in Ireland. And so when I was coming back from my studies, a friend of mine, for some reason, reminded me that my birthday was coming up. And I just looked at the year and I was like, oh, I'm turning 21 this year. So this is a strange moment for me, because where most 21-year-olds are excited about, they get to go and have their first legal beverage. I was thinking of the fact that my father is going to exit prison. And so it was kind of a symbolic day for me to kind of think of how far I've come in my life. The fact that I was like in college, which is very rare, right? Like if people look at the statistics of foster youth, there's about 1,100 youth every single day that enter the system. Of that 1,100 children, there's only 54% that graduate high school. Of those 54%, only 11% apply for secondary education, and of those 11%, only 3% graduate college, right? And here I am, like I'm at the going on my final year of college, and I'm pretty much at the cusp of graduating. And to think just how far, like I was that scared young little kid going through hell on earth, right? And there were some times in college, like I wanted to quit. It was super hard. Like I was struggling in my courses. Again, calculus and physics, like super demanding. The hours were long. I mean, I was up at 4 o'clock in the morning, up until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Just I had PT. I was taking 20 plus credit hours, which is pretty unheard of for college students. I'm away from home, like I'm 6,000 miles away from home. I don't know anyone else there until I started to make friends. So yeah, life got super difficult in college, but just seeing the resilience that I've had within me, I mean, I felt like no matter how hard it got, nothing was as difficult as what I've been through. And so that kind of kept me going. So when I turned 21, that was kind of like that precipice.
So it was more of an inspirational time than a time to be feared. Your father was getting out. It caused you to reflect at how far you've come and the success that you had in life. And that's amazing. Exactly. And so we only have a couple more minutes. I want to ask you what's in store for you. And I know you're married. Your wife has encouraged you. She's the one who encouraged you to come forward and tell your story. What's next? What do you want to do going forward? What's your goals? Because you're still very young, right? You're what, 30?
Yeah, I'm just about 30. So
still
very young. Yep. Yeah, so my wife is one of the ones who inspired me to kind of be on this journey. So when we first met, I didn't really tell her like all that I've been through. I mean, it's natural that people ask, like when you first meet someone for the first time, is like, what's your name? Where are you from? And in either your third, maybe fifth question, people ask about how many siblings do you have? And when I answer that question, it immediately elicits a lot of questions, right? So if you ask me now, like, how many siblings do I have? And I respond, I have 17 siblings. That's gonna, some people are gonna have questions about that. And so it's natural for me, like I talk about it all the time. And so she asked me one day, like, oh, how many siblings do you have? I'm like, oh, I have 17, like just very casually, like there's just nothing different about it. and she was like shocked. She was like, "Wait, why do you have so many siblings?" And so that's kind of how those conversations started, right? Like I let her know I was in foster care, and I've lived in many different homes, and this is like where all my siblings come from. Um, just kind of explaining like the hierarchy, our family tree is very complicated. And so over time, it was probably right before we got married that I mentioned that I was like physically abused and whatnot. I didn't go into like super details. Um, and so over time, she's just kind of been very inspired by my story, right? For me, I think of it as like I'm just any other person in this world who has gone through difficult trials and tribulations and made a life for themselves, right? Like just like anyone else would, in my eyes, right? Like that's just my thought process. I'm no special than someone else, right? The way she looked at it was the fact of like, wait, but you're not, because I call myself like just another guy, just another dude. And she's like, but you're not. Like you're someone who has gone through so much and can inspire other people if they heard your story. And so I kind of came from it. At first, I was afraid to kind of go out there and share my story because I don't want to put myself on some pedestal, right? I'm no better than anyone else, right? We all go through our own difficult times in life. And so I wanted to come from a place of humility, a place of understanding. And so it took me a long time last year to kind of really build up that the right thought process, the right mindset to come to a platform like this. Especially this is my first live one. All my other ones are pre-recorded. I'll actually drop my link tree in the chat for other people if you're curious about hearing other aspects of my story. Like by all means, I have different forms of media there to explore. And so I really owe it to my wife to encourage me to do this. I still keep in touch with my therapist. I've known him for over 20 years now, to the point that we're just friends. He'll call me up whenever I'm home in Hawaii visiting my family. He'll take me out to dinner, take me out to lunch, and we'll just hang out. For the past year and a half now, I've gone into real estate investing. So that's something else I do. I have a small business investing in commercial real estate. And my wife and I have a goal to achieve financial freedom. So that way we can work on what we're truly passionate about. So I'm actually in the process of transitioning out of the military. And then, both of us are building our businesses and we want to get to a point of financial freedom. So we have the choice to do what it is that we want to in life. We want to travel the world, right? Now I have a goal in the next 5 years to visit 50 different countries because life is short, right? I told you that my birth brother passed away when he was just 15, and just kind of seeing my parents who took very great care of me are so much older in life, and their health is not where it used to be, right? They don't have the same strength that they used to, and because of a lot of the sacrifice they made in life, they didn't get a chance to go and experience the world. And so I want to be able to get to a point where I have the options to be able to do that. But more importantly, then I would be able to be an advocate for this space. And I want to start a mentorship for other foster youth on learning about financial education, financial literacy, financial independence, learning about health and physical fitness, and just help others find ways that they can take charge of their own lives and have a chance at going after their dreams, right? To not be afraid to attempt new things, and kind of just put yourself out there in a good way to impact your community. And so that's really what we envision our life to be in the next few years.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today and sharing your incredible story of triumph. It's truly inspirational. Thank you, Dairius. And thank you all survivors out there. It's your courage that gives all of us strength. Thank you.
Thank you. Aloha.
Hands on my chin, I was lost and looking in the glass of time. Was it just the wine made me cry? I hope I'm satisfied. I saw myself, an older man, folding up his paper plans and hiding it in his hands. Made me say, am I okay? Don't say too late tomorrow, too late tomorrow.